Welcome to the Lost Boys to Found Fathers podcast. I'm Gabe O'Sullivan, and joining me is my co-host Will Haycox. We are men who have suffered the loss of a child, and through this production we desire to offer encouragement, strength, and hope to our fellow brothers who have traveled the same journey. Good morning, Will.
Good morning, Gabe.
So we're going to continue today where we started last time on a little mini-series called From Where Does My Help Come? Or Where Does My Help Come From? I'm trying to not end the sentence with a preposition because seems like I remember my teachers in class saying that was not good. But who cares, man? We're not writing, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're just talking here. So from where does my help come? And we had some great discussion last time about our help comes from the Lord, and we gave some examples about that from Scripture. And why are we doing this? Well, because a lot of times when folks lose a loved one, particularly a child, like we're talking about on this podcast, we sometimes feel like we're stuck on an island and we're all by ourselves. And we have to remember that, no, there are opportunities out there to actually have some help. We're not on an island by ourselves. And we talked about some ways that we can put support around us and what can we do to help push us through our grief and experience that in a healthy way, but then move past that and get back to kind of moving forward instead of staying stuck. And so, Will, why don't you go ahead and kind of bring us up to speed?
Yeah, thanks, Gabe. Yeah, welcome, guys. This is episode 15, starting at where we left off with episode 14. So this is kind of a little mini-series here. Like you said, Gabe, we just talked about, the question was, how does the death of my child affect my spiritual life and my marriage, and what can I do to try to move towards the positive outcome more than a negative outcome? And like you said, we just discussed some examples from the Bible. We talked about David and how when he's being hunted by Saul and by his son, and when he's just going through all of his struggles and trials, how he turns to the Lord and he says, in Psalm 121, that I lift my eyes to the hills. From where does my help come? My help comes from the Lord. So he just says it right out there that God is who he relies on, who he trusts, and when he's going through trials, he knows he can count on the Lord because the Lord is his refuge. So we went from there. We just talked about the importance of prayer. We may get into that a little more today. And we left off with a quote from C.S. Lewis that said, "You must ask for God's help. Even when you have done so, it may seem to you for a long time that no help or less help than you need is being given. Never mind. After each failure, ask forgiveness, pick yourself up, and try again." Very often what God first helps us towards is not the virtue itself, but just this power of always trying again. So I think what we left off there was how prayer is not like rubbing a lamp and talking to the genie and telling him, hey, this is what I need. Then you get it immediately, and then life is good and you move forward, and the genie goes back in the lamp and leaves you alone. But God is ever present, and he's personal, and he wants a relationship with you. And since he knows everything, he knows that when you're asking for a particular thing, it might be a good thing in a vacuum, but it may not be the thing that's best for you right then. So because he loves you more than you love yourself, and he knows what's best for you, he may not always give you exactly what you want when you ask for it, but he is faithful and he will do what is best for you. And as we've talked about before, he works all things for the good of those who are called according to his purpose. So
I'm going to jump in right there, man, just say that whole genie in the bottle thing, I remember thinking that when I was, when we were going through our stuff with our girls, years ago, I was like, God, I'm asking you to heal them and let them live, but, it's not working, so to speak, and so I was like, well, Lord, you said in your word that if I ask according to your name, or if I ask in your name, then you'll give me whatever I ask. I was like, I'm asking for this. It's not like a selfish thing. I'm asking for you to heal these kids, and even before that, I was asking you, Lord, please let my wife's preterm labor stop so that she won't deliver these kids at 25 weeks, right? Because I knew how bad that would be. And I was really disillusioned because I felt like that God wasn't being my genie in a bottle, and he was for some reason I thought he was supposed to be at my beck and call, like he served me instead of me serving him. Super bad, wrong theology right there. And then secondly, I got very discouraged because I was like, well, you read verses like, be it, according to your faith, be it unto you. And so then I was like, oh, well, it's just because I have such poor faith. I have such a lack of faith. This is why this is not happening. But if I had greater faith, if I really believed more, then God would be answering my prayers. But I can't manifest this to happen because my faith is so weak. And that's not correct theology either. That's just not the way things work. I mean, when God talks about ask according to my name, he's talking about ask according to his will. Well, we don't always know, we've talked about this before, what his will is. And we can't sway his will. And we have to accept that when stuff doesn't turn out the way we think it should, like in a situation where we're asking for something and it doesn't seem to come about, we have to jump back and then be like, okay, well, God had his reasons for that. I'm still going to choose to trust him and follow him no matter what. And I want guys to understand that and hear that we serve God. He does not serve us. When we're talking about praying according to his name, we are talking about praying according to his will. What do we know are his will? Well, he wants us to, do things that would be honoring and pleasing to him. He wants us to have the fruit of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. There's all these different things that we can pray, that we can be assured of that we will receive. But some things we just don't know that we're going to receive because we don't know his ultimate plan. Now, looking back on it 16 years later, what I can say is that I pray, God, would you heal my girls? Well, guess what? He healed them. He healed them eternally. He didn't heal them, temporally here on earth to then die again one day. He healed them eternally. And I can say that with full confidence because I know that they're with him now in heaven, and one day I'll go to be with them. And it wasn't that I had this, well, maybe it was that I had a lack of faith. Obviously, I need to increase my faith every day, but that's not why he didn't answer my prayers. He didn't answer my prayers the way I thought they needed to be answered because that wasn't according to his will ultimately. Because if it was, it would have been answered. And I'm not trying to I really, I don't feel like I'm trying to explain away God here. I'm trying to help you, the guys, understand, and myself still understand that this is the way things work, right? And that's okay. And we have to come to that realization that we are not in control. God is in control. If things don't turn out the way we think they are, well, it's just because our thinking was wrong. And we're not we don't think like him. His thoughts are higher than our thoughts. His ways are higher than our ways. And we have to come to that point where we're okay with that. But not only be okay with that, we have to be thankful for that, because why would we want a God that serves us, right? Why would we want a God that's not all powerful, right? We want a God that we can serve and that is all powerful.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's that's an easy thing to relate to. I'm close enough to being a teenager that I remember, there were times when I thought something was good and right, excuse me, and was the best thing for me was to go hang out with friends on a school night or night of a test or, whatever I thought was best. And so I went to my parents and I was like, hey, friends are doing this and this and this. I want to go hang out with them. I'll be home and I'll study for the test, or I'll be back in bed by 9:30, whatever it is, and things will be great and you don't have to worry. And my parents, in the place of God in this scenario, are like, no, I know better. I've had that experience, and I know if you go hang out with these friends, you're going to be home by 9:30. You're really going to be home by 10:30, 11:30, whatever. You're not going to study for your test. You're going to be in bad shape tomorrow. You're going to fail. It's going to be a negative consequence for you. So it's really easy for us as parents to say, and you, if you're a parent or just you're an adult, to see God in the place of that parent knows the outcome, and he's not going to give you something that you think is best or right for you if it's going to be a negative outcome for you in the future, or if it's just not what the best thing is for you, because he loves you enough to be straight with you, or just to do the hard thing by not giving you exactly what you asked for, because he knows the better thing is what's going to come in the future. And so I think that just comes with, like you said, Gabe, having a deeper faith and a trust in God, and just knowing that if he doesn't give you what you want immediately, it's not because he doesn't love you. It's not because he doesn't care about you. It's because he does care about you and love you, that he's not going to immediately give you everything you ask for. So that's, like you said, that's a very important thing to know and understand especially at this time in life and with going through the grief of struggling with the loss of a child. So I think prayer is certainly something we can have multiple episodes on, because prayer is just such an amazing thing. It's such a powerful thing. But this isn't a series on prayer, so we'll probably do that at some point in the future. But just moving to kind of where we wanted to go next with this was, what can I do? I don't know if every guy out there that is listening feels the same way I do, but I'm call it a doer or a man of action, that I wake up and I'm like, all right, I have Saturday free. I want to do something productive. I want to cut the grass. I want to plan this project. I want to do this. So what can you do actively to try to get closer to having a positive outcome from the loss of your child that blesses other people around you, that glorifies God, and helps you get into a better place spiritually and in a better relationship with you and your wife? So just the most obvious thing, but I think the most important thing, is wake up every single day and make a conscious choice to choose to trust God and choose to love your wife and try to draw closer to them. And this is something you do every day, but you have to do it multiple times a day. And this isn't a skill that you have. It's not something that some guys are just better at being husbands, or some guys are just better at having faith. And I'm just a poor guy. I don't have a lot of faith, and I'm not super loving to my wife, so that's an excuse and I don't have to work at it. Like, no, you can be the laziest husband, you can be the most neglecting guy of your quiet time or your time with the Lord, and you still have a responsibility to do this and to be a good husband, and to, if you're a Christian, to build your relationship with the Lord. And that's something you work at every day. It's the same as going to the gym or trying to be a better employee. You're not going to get better at it by just wanting to and not taking any action. So what you need to do is wake up every day, choose to trust your wife, choose to trust God and love your wife. And for me, it's simple steps like writing a note to your wife in the morning, or taking a time to do a quiet time. And that's our next point, is the importance of a quiet time. But grief is hard. We know that there'll be good days and there'll be bad days. So on the bad days when you don't feel like you can get out of bed, you and your wife are struggling because maybe how you're handling the death of your child is different from each other. And you have to be intentional with this love of your wife and with this trying to draw close to the Lord. So if you just get out of bed and you rely on your feelings and what you feel like doing that day, whether you feel like loving your wife, you feel like God is near to you, so you want to get closer to Him that day by praying and by doing a quiet time, but the next day you wake up and you just feel like, God, I haven't really felt anything from God today, so I just, I'll do a quiet time tomorrow when I feel closer to Him. That's a really dangerous place to be in, because if you're relying on your feelings are going to change as the wind changes.
Man, that's so good. And I want to say a couple things in there. One, in regards to that feelings versus, I'll say that emotions versus purpose. Okay, or motivation versus purpose. This is not original to me. I either heard it from Darren Hardy or I heard it from Jocko Willink, and they said we don't want to be driven by motivation, because motivation can wane, just like you were talking about. That goes with our emotions, right? Our emotions follow our motivation. Our motivation follows our emotions. But if we are driven by purpose, then that drives us past our emotions. Because we may not wake up, like you said, feeling like being a good husband or growing closer to the Lord today. But if we know our purpose is draw closer to the Lord, if our purpose is be a better husband, take care of my wife, provide for her, take care of her emotionally, physically, spiritually, socially, then that purpose is going to drive us past our emotions. And it makes me think about doing burpees. One of the most evil exercises on planet Earth, right? But they're great in this scenario, or in this as an example here, because when you're doing burpees, you get knocked down, intentionally, of course. You're down, and then you got to make the conscious decision to get back up. Then you get knocked back down, and then you have to make the conscious decision to get back up. And if you know that you're doing a set of 20 or 50 or 100 or whatever the case may be, like if you're a driven person and your purpose is to finish that set, then every time you're going to make that conscious decision to get back up. And that's the way it is in this situation, especially when you're going through grief of the loss of a child. is we've got to make that conscious decision every day to get up and do the right things that need to be done, like spending time with the Lord, like deciding to love your wife. And one thing that helps me in this is I pray these 2 prayers a lot. I'll say, Lord, help me today to grow closer to you and closer to my wife. And I'll say, Lord, keep my eyes focused on you and my eyes only focused on my wife. Meaning let them not stray to the lust of the world or the lust of other women. And those 2 things help me to start out my day and get my mind right. But as you said, that's something that I don't just pray once and let it go. Like I have to pray that prayer and be thinking about that as we go throughout the day.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an important point you bring up there is you can't, if you get in the routine of waking up, you roll out of bed, you get dressed and you pray, Lord, help me to love you today and draw closer to you. Help me to love my wife and draw closer to her. That's a great way to start out your day. But just because you prayed that once doesn't mean it's going to stay that way the rest of the day. Because you're going to get to the office at 7:30, 8 o'clock. And by 8:15, something's come up. Something didn't go the way it was supposed to go, whatever. Something with the kids was crazy. Your wife had a bad day. One of you forgot something. So by 9 o'clock, you're just totally thrown off. And you're like, well, I guess I'm not going to do my quiet time today. Or, gosh, I can't believe my wife did that. Okay, whatever. I'm just going to get to the day. And the thing I was planning to do for dinner tonight, I'm not going to do, whatever it is. So to me, like you said, I have those prayers that are just something that anytime something comes up that you start feeling further away from the Lord, or you start feeling, like you said, the temptation coming in to think thoughts that you shouldn't, I have that same prayer where I'm like, Lord, help me to dwell on things that please you and not to dwell on things that will displease you. Help me to love my wife and help me to be drawn closer to you. And I think it seems like a little silly saying just to talk to yourself and, say that quickly. But like you said, the importance of reminding yourself that, like preaching to yourself, like, this is what I believe. I don't feel this right now, but I need to redirect my thoughts and redirect my heart to what I know is right, even when my heart is being drawn another direction. And I think that conversation leads right into another C.S. Lewis quote from Mere Christianity. He says, do not waste time bothering whether you love your neighbor. Act as if you did. As soon as we do this, we find one of the greatest secrets. When you're behaving as if you love someone, you'll presently come to love him. And I think this quote is perfect for our conversation and for the relationship between a husband and a wife, because like we've been saying, there are definitely going to be times. So if you've been married longer than, what, Gabe, 3 months, 6 months, you'll know, maybe even a month for some people, that you don't always feel love. You don't feel this storybook love of, like, I rolled out of bed and my wife's hair is perfect and I'm ready to go, and there are birds sitting outside the window and there's rose petals all over our bedroom, and this is just like beautiful, perfect love and everything is great. And you're going to have those days when, like we said, something goes wrong. You and your wife aren't on the same page and that causes an argument, whatever it is. Maybe you're being a really crappy husband, and so that causes her to be frustrated with you, and that leads to frustration between the two of you. There's not going to be like an easy day every single day, and it's just like, oh, I feel just perfect love towards my wife. So just like this quote says, when you feel that frustration with your wife, when she does something she shouldn't have done, or you do something you shouldn't have, and that causes tension, don't let that be the end of the conversation and you just go away feeling bitter. Like, tell yourself and choose, okay, I love this woman. I've committed my life to her. I need to act like I love her. And even if she did do something really terrible that frustrated you, say you're both going through the grief of losing your child, and she says this is a common thing, how come you're not as sad as I am, whatever, you're not crying as much as I am, or you don't talk about our child as much as I do. Do you even care about him? If you're in that conversation, that's a hard thing. I know that has happened between couples, and that can be very hurtful to have your wife tell you, like, you don't even care about our child because you're not reacting the same way I am. Even in that moment where you're struggling with that desire to defend yourself and prove yourself to your wife, behave as if you loved her. And you don't feel love at that moment, you feel anger, but turn that around and say, okay, if I loved her, how would I respond? And you respond with love, you respond with grace, you respond with patience, and you work that situation out. And that could be any situation. So when you continually respond as if you love someone, as if you feel love towards someone, then you'll realize, as the quote says, it becomes easier and easier to love that person. And I think for me, in my spiritual life, that's been true, because when I first became a Christian, I knew that I should feel love towards God and drawn to doing a quiet time every day and, focusing half my day or whatever, some period on prayer and on, I want to serve you, God, wherever you take me, into the mission field, into wherever, here, there. That's a thing that doesn't just come naturally, I don't think, to like, oh, well, I became a Christian and now I want to dedicate everything to God. I think that's, for me, it was an important part of my faith, was if I felt deep faith right now and I felt like I wanted to commit everything to the Lord, how would I respond? And then even in those moments where I don't feel that faith, I respond that way. And that makes it easier the next time you're training yourself in, okay, so last time I didn't feel perfect faith, I responded this way, and that was right. So the next time I feel maybe a little more faith, but I think, what should I do? And I respond that way, and that's also right. And so it just gets easier and easier. You're training yourself to follow the Lord and to love your wife. And I think that's a practice you could probably take with anything that you want to do, going to the gym, whatever it is. But especially the two most important relationships you have in your life are going to be your relationship with the Lord and your relationship with your wife. So, like we said, allowing your emotions to lead is just a very dangerous thing to do. So, to respond in love is a discipline, and it's not something you just roll out of bed ready to do every day.
Yeah, and I would say that goes back to purpose and determination. Mm-hmm. What's our purpose? And then once you have your purpose set, which is love my wife, right, in this scenario right here, even though, we're struggling, even though we're having a difficult time coming out of this loss, and even though we may be saying things to each other that we will resent or regret later, mm-hmm. Like our purpose is still to love one another and to be there for one another. Mm-hmm. And love is a verb. It's not an emotion, mm-hmm. right? There's some amorous feelings that come out of being in love with somebody, but inevitably, like, love is a choice that we make. We choose to love our spouse, and it's not just how are they making us feel, it's what can we do to serve them. Mm-hmm. Jesus said that husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and laid down his life for her. So we are to be servants to our wives, and so we look for ways to serve them. And guess what? If we do that, they're going to lay down their lives for us too, and they're going to be servants towards us. Like, it's going to go both ways. And so we're not saying be a doormat here. We're saying that you literally, like, put yourself second, so that way you can put your wife first, and that's going to be a good thing, because you're going to come out winning in the end. Okay, both of you are, and so I think that we just need to remember that it's all about a choice. It's all about determination. It's all about what's your purpose, and sticking to that, even on times when you don't feel like it, or even times when you feel like your emotional or physical, whatever needs may not be being met. Mm-hmm. If we act out of love, then eventually I think they will be. Mm-hmm. And I love this quote from Jeremiah. You want to read that you've got there?
If I could quit coughing, I'll probably love that all episode. We've been just talking about, like, why you can't trust your feelings. And I think this is perfect proof from Jeremiah 17:9-10. God speaks, saying, the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately sick. Who can understand it? I, the Lord, search the heart and test the mind, to give every man according to his ways, according to the fruit of his deeds. So that's two things there. God searches the heart and tests the mind, so he knows what's in our heart, so we can't hide it from him. But that first there is just, the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately sick. So that, to me, just says, when you feel like, that's such a thing in our culture today, is YOLO, you only live once, you do you, live your best life. Don't do anything. Yeah, follow your heart. Don't do anything that doesn't make you happy. Like, I guess there was something that was big on Netflix. It was about furniture, stuff in your house. It was like, don't keep anything around that doesn't bring you joy or something like that. And like that may be fine if you want to treat your furniture that way, but when you start internalizing that and you start saying, "Oh, my wife doesn't really bring me a lot of joy," I don't know how they're defining joy, because I don't think joy is an emotion. I think we need to see from the Bible joy is a state of mind that you're given by the Spirit. But that's a very dangerous way to approach your life, because life is full of full of times that you're going to have to do something that you don't feel like it, when it's going to be a great benefit to you. And if you didn't do anything that you didn't feel like doing, you would never have a good, strong marriage. You'd never be able to have any kind of good friendships with anyone if you only hung out with them. I mean, everyone's probably had that friend that only hung out with them when things are good or when you could do something for them. And when you had that friend, reflect on how you felt when, like, the times when you needed something, you called them and they weren't there, or they were just like, "Sorry, I'm busy." Like, did you feel like this person really loves me and cares about me? And that's how I want to be towards other people. So knowing that life is full of times that you're going to have to do something you don't want to do, like what are those things? Maintaining your car. Like, if you don't, probably some of you probably don't want to go out and change the oil, rotate the brakes, rotate your tires, change the brakes, all those things that you have to do to a car to keep it running. But if you don't do that, eventually one day you're going to get in that car and you're not going to be able to go anywhere. So eating healthy is the same way. You're 35 years old now and you're in great shape and you're just like, cool, I'm in good enough shape now. Or the analogy here, my marriage is in good enough shape. I don't need to put any more work towards it. I don't need to go to the gym. I don't need to eat healthy. So I'm just going to do whatever I want now. I'm going to eat junk food. I'm going to think of thoughts I shouldn't about another woman in the marriage analogy there, and things will be good because we're in a good place, so we'll just let it coast. Like, eventually your body is going to start breaking down, because even though you started in a great place, you aren't eating healthy anymore, you aren't exercising, you're doing all the worst things. And at some point, maybe you were in great shape and it's going to take a few years. Maybe you're not in such great shape and it might take a few months. You're going to get to a place where you're not in good shape anymore. You've been doing all these bad things and you're in such a place that you've got this health problem or that health problem. And maybe if you just give it all away when you're 35, by the time you're 40, you're a totally different person, and you're like at the point of needing some medical interventions to help you out. And so same thing for your marriage. If you're 35, you're 30, and you have a great relationship with your wife, and you're like, I put a lot of work towards this, but this is hard, so I don't want to work so hard to having a great marriage anymore. Sure, go ahead and try that. But 6 months later, 2 years later, 5 years later, you're going to wake up and you're going to realize, wow, my marriage isn't what it was 3, 4, 5 years ago when everything was great. And why is that? Because I didn't do the things that I needed to do as a husband to take care of my wife, to love my wife, to build that relationship. So approach loving God and your wife, not begrudgingly, but with determination to keep pushing towards that goal. Like you've been saying this whole time, Gabe, that motivation, that determination. And when it's hard for you, don't feel like you have to do this thing because it's a nice thing to do, or it's a whatever, what people would expect from you. Do it because you've made a commitment to the Lord that you were going to love that woman and you were going to be with her, and you made a commitment to the Lord that you were going to follow him and you're going to be a believer and a follower of Christ. So you've made that commitment. You're a man. You need to stick by your word. You need to do the right thing. So love your wife because it's the good and the right thing to do. I didn't mean to cut you off there, Gabe. What do you got?
No, that's awesome. I think this is a great way, seeing what's next on our notes, for us to kind of tie up this episode, is say that, these episodes are, from where does my help come? Well, right here, we're saying, A, the help comes from the Lord. But B, the help comes from us determining our purpose before we act. And so we have some internal help. Right? We've got some internal help because we're driven by purpose. We're not driven by emotions. We're not driven by feelings. Your purpose is to get through this grief. Your purpose is to learn from this very difficult time. Your purpose is to love your wife and help her get through this difficult purpose. So why? So you can be a comfort to her, and then eventually so you can comfort others. So that way this loss is not lost. it has a purpose, right? So our help comes from the Lord. Our help also comes from these internal purposes that we have that's going to drive us, okay? And so Hebrews 13:5-6 says, it says, so that I may boldly say, the Lord is my helper, I will not fear. Okay, so we've got to remember, the Lord is our helper through this. When you don't feel those emotions, when you don't feel that motivation, just remember that God's given you purpose. Okay, and you can have that as your driving factor and motivating factor to get up and to love your wife well every day. And that's really what we've been talking about in this episode, is making that conscious choice to get up and to do the right thing and to love your wife. And now on the next episode, we're going to be talking about making the conscious choice every day to get up and spend some time with the Lord. So make sure that you're plugging yourself into our next episode.
Yeah, thanks guys for joining us today. Make sure you follow Lost Boys to Found Fathers on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can always check out Gabe's book at thywillbedonebook.com. And remember, you don't have to be lost. Let's be found in him.